Hey everybody, in this video I'm going to go through specifically the functional movement screen, the different measures and how we measure. So when we're doing the functional movement screen, we score on a 0 to 3 scale. 0 is if there is pain during the movement. 3 is if they do the movement perfectly. 2 is if we use a modification or they can't do it perfect. A 1 is if they have poor movement, maybe some balance deficits. And I'll talk about those when we do each test. So the first test we're going to do is a deep squat. So the other thing when we talk about FMS is you want to make sure you do it exactly the same every time and you use the same instructions and the same demonstration for validity and reliability. So feet hip width apart. The stick, hold it on top of the head, then lift the arms straight up. You're going to do a squat lower than knees, all the way down and up. If they come forward, let me show you from the side. Come all the way down and up. Now you see how I went forward. In order to get a 3, you have to have your butt lower than your knees, trunk in line with the tibia, and the arms stay overhead. So if they can't do that, so that's how you get a 3. If they can't do that, then we're going to modify it. The modification is putting a board under the heel. So if you don't have the kit, you can use a 2x4. We're going to put that board under the heel. We're going to repeat the same thing all the way down, all the way up. So if they can do it well with the modification, they get a 2. If they can't do it well, then they would get a 1. So let me give you an example of a 1. It would look like this. Or maybe they can get down low, but their trunk still comes forward. That would be a 2. Or I'm sorry, that would have been a 1. So a 2 is if they do it well with the modification. Okay, next one is our hurdle step. So the hurdle step, what we're going to do is we're going to measure the length of the tibia. So you go at the base of the kneecap at the infrapatellar tendon and you take that measurement. So that allows us to standardize it for anybody, whatever height they are. So you're going to put that measurement on, that's going to be the height of your hurdle. The stick goes behind the shoulders, feet are together and toes are very close to the board. They can look at their feet, but once they get situated, they have to look straight ahead. They can't look at their feet. We'll start with the right leg. The leg comes up and over, touch only the heel, come back to the start. You can do that up to 3 times. Let's go to the left leg, same thing. Up and over, touch only the heel, and then back to the start. In order to get a 3, you have to move the entire leg in the sagittal plane, and you can't have any hiking of the hip. So if they can clear the hurdle well in between these 2 sticks, that's a 2. So let me give you an example. So I was a 2, but I was not too bad. But you can see here, when I come up and over my height, maybe it's hard for you to see there, but I hike my hip. Another thing you'll see very often is they will come up, pull the foot in, rotate the hip to try to get that to clear. That would be a 2. A 1 would be if they can't clear it without coming outside of the sticks. So an example of a 1 would be that. Another example is if they come down, but they lose their balance and they have to push up with their foot. And then a 0, of course, if they have pain during the motion. Okay, next is our inline lunge. The inline lunge, we use that same measurement of the tibia, and that's how we place our feet. It's scored for the forward foot. So their back foot goes behind the 0. Their heel goes at whatever you measured. Now they can use the stick to gain balance to get on the board if they need to. So I have my left foot forward, I have my right foot forward, so my left hand's going to be on the top. My right hand's going to be on the back. I'll do one facing forward and one to the side. They do a complete lunge all the way down and come back up. In order to get a 3, they have to be able to do that. Touch the knee on the board, come all the way back up. They have to start with their heel down and they have to return to with their heel down without losing their balance. So let me show you that from the side. Okay, so if we were looking at them from the side, the big thing with this is that they keep their trunk vertical. So I'm going to come down and then come up. So if I can do that with a vertical trunk, I can get a 3. If their trunk comes forward, it's a 2, so that looks like this. And a 1 would be if they can complete the movement, but they lose balance, they don't stay in that sagittal plane. Okay, so that's the inline lunge. The other way that they can't, if their knee comes off the board, so sometimes when people will lunge, their knee won't touch the board, they'll go out to the side. That would also qualify them. If their knee comes off to the side and they can keep a good tall trunk, they get a 2, but if they come forward and their knee doesn't touch, they get a 1. Okay, straight leg raise. So with your straight leg raise, that's probably the one where there's a lot of things to watch. So you're gonna lay on the back, the knees are over the board, toes up, feet together, and their arms have to be at their sides. Okay, so we're gonna start, we're gonna lift the right leg, and then back down, and then let me do the left, and then back down. What you really have to watch is that they keep their knee straight. So when you start to see a bend in the knee, then you have to call it where it's at. Another thing you might see is they might hike their hip or they might rotate either hip. So this all has to stay solid. They have to keep their knee straight. So I would stop there. And let me describe a little bit better about the scoring. So when you're going to score, so when you have that person here, their knees are over the board, and then you measure between their ASIS, their mid-patella, that is going to be their bisecting line. So that's where you put the stick. So if they can do everything correctly, keep their knee straight, and clear the stick, that's a 3. If they go between the board and the stick, that's a 2. If they're lower than the board, that's a 1. A 0 would be with pain. Now this one is really hard. Like I said, you really have to watch that knee. And if that knee would bend a little bit, that's where you stop the test. Because a lot of people will bend their knee to compensate for tight hamstrings, let's say. Okay, next is the push-up. So to make it standard, we tell them how to do it exactly the same every time. So we're going to start on our stomachs, arms up, thumbs pointed straight ahead. For guys, you start with the thumbs at the temple and then come out. And if they can't do it correctly, the modification, then they come to their chin and then out. For ladies, you start with the thumbs up to the chin and then out. If they can't do it correctly, the modification is to the clavicle and then out. So in order to get a 3, you need to do it either gentlemen at temples, ladies at chin, and they have to be in one solid line. So they have to go up and down in one solid line. Often what you'll see is they will do something like that, or they might, what happens is they can't keep their trunk in a solid line, so they'll come up a little bit and then come up into that push-up. Then you'd modify, and then you try it again. You just do 1. So if they can do it absolutely correctly, it's a 3. If you modify and they can do it correctly, it's a 2. If you modify and they still can't do it correctly, that's a 1. Then we're going to do the rotary stability. So the rotary stability, if you have someone with trunk stability that can do a 3, then I would test them at the highest level with the rotary stability. So what that is, so everybody's going to put their hands under their shoulders, their toes are, their feet are under their hips, and their thumbs, their knees, and their toes touch the board. So to do it, to get a 3, you have to lift the same side arm and leg, which is really, really hard. So I'm going to modify a little. Looks like this, out, and then back to the center. That's a 3. Like I said, that's really, really hard. I've been doing this for 8 years at SMSU, and I think I've had about 3 people that have done that. If they can't, then our modification is opposite side. So you start out, the elbow has to touch the knee over the board, out, back down. All right, now some compensations you'll see with this, even when you do the modification. So if they can do a 3, so again, I'll show you, but I'm going to cheat because I can't do it. So my hand would be here, but I'm just going to substitute a little bit. So they have to go out, in, out, and back down to get a 3 without all that wiggling. Okay. Now with a 2, when you do that, what you'll see when they come in, if they don't have good enough mobility, what'll happen is either their arm will come like this, so their elbow has to touch their knee over the board. Sometimes what you'll see is they can't touch their elbow to the knee because they don't have good enough mobility. So 3, same side, 2, opposite side, but their elbow has to touch their knee over the board. They come back out and down. So let me demonstrate that one more time. So they go out, elbow touches knee, out and down, both sides. Okay, now the other thing I want to cover is what are called clearing tests. So when you use FMS, a lot of different people use it. Personal trainers, strength and conditioning coaches, athletic trainers, physical therapists, anybody can use the FMS. But within your scope of practice is where we use the clearing test. So the first one we do is for the shoulder. So the shoulder clearing test, and now I remember I forgot to do that on our subject. The shoulder clearing test, they bring their arm across, lift their elbow up and down, is their pain. Positive is pain, negative is no pain. And then they would do the other side, okay? And again, don't ask them, does it hurt? Ask them if there's pain, because a lot of times they might be, oh, I'm sore because I lifted yesterday, things like that. It has to be painful. Positive is pain, negative is no pain. And if it's pain and it's not in your scope of practice, you refer it out. So me as a physical therapist, I can then evaluate and treat that. If you were a strength and conditioning coach, then you would refer that to the athletic training department or the physical therapist. Okay, so that's shoulder. Now, again, in the video I did, now that I remember, I did not do the shoulder clearing test. She did have a negative clearing test. It was no pain on both sides. The next one you're going to do is after they do the push-up, you're going to do the clearing test here. So they are on their stomach and they do a press up, any pain. Negative is no pain, positive is pain. The last clearing test after the rotary stability, they are going to sit back on their heels like this. Negative is no pain, positive is pain. So that is an explanation of the functional movement screen. It's a great tool, but again, remember, it's a screening tool. It is not a high-level evaluation tool, but it gives you a really good idea of good movement and maybe some movement deficits in your athletes and your clients.